After 22 years of marriage, my wife said, "Don't touch me tonight." What I whispered back the next morning changed everything. Sometimes walking away is the strongest thing a man can do. Here's how I rebuilt my life from nothing. My name is Gary Hicks. I'm 49 years old, and I own Hicks Plumbing Services here in Riverside, Ohio. Started the company from nothing 15 years ago. Built it into something respectable. 3 trucks, steady contracts, enough work to keep me busy from dawn till dusk. My hands are permanently stained with pipe grease, and my back aches most mornings, but it's honest work that puts food on the table. Linda and we met back in college. She was studying elementary education, had this laugh that could light up a whole room. We got married young, had our son Michael when we were both 23. Those early years were tough, diapers, sleepless nights, trying to make ends meet while I worked for other people's plumbing companies. But we were a team back then. We fought together, dreamed together. Michael's 26 now, married to a sweet girl named Rachel, and they just gave us our first grandchild, little Emma. When Michael moved out for good at 21, Linda went through what she called her empty nest phase. The house felt too quiet, too big. That's when we decided to adopt. Patricia, we call her Patty, came to us 3 years ago. She was 9 then, had bounced around foster homes since she was 6. The social worker warned us about attachment issues, behavioral problems. But Linda's maternal instincts kicked in hard. She said every child deserves a real family, and I agreed. Patty's 12 now, doing better in school, finally calling us mom and dad without that hesitation in her voice. But somewhere along the way, Linda and I stopped being partners. Maybe it was the stress of raising an adopted child at our age. Maybe it was Linda hitting her 40s and questioning everything. Hell, maybe it was me spending too many nights on emergency calls, fixing other people's problems while my own marriage slowly started leaking. The signs were there if I'd bother to look. Linda stopped asking about my day. She'd have dinner ready, but wouldn't sit down to eat with me anymore. Said she wasn't hungry, had already eaten. The woman who used to massage my shoulders after long days now flinched when I touched her arm. Our conversations became logistics, Patty's school events, bill payments, scheduling around my work calls. Last month, I noticed she'd started dressing differently. Not for me, mind you. She put on makeup to go grocery shopping, started buying clothes that actually fit instead of those loose sweaters she'd been living in. When I complimented her new dress, she just shrugged and said it was on sale. Tuesday night started like any other. I'd spent the day fixing a burst pipe at the Henderson place. Came home around 7 with my clothes soaked and my mood sour. Mrs. Henderson had blamed me for the mess, like I'd personally sabotaged her basement. Some days this job feels thankless, but the bills don't pay themselves. Linda was in the kitchen when I walked in, stirring something on the stove. Patty was at the dining table, working on homework with that focused concentration only 12-year-olds can manage. For a split second, it felt normal, like the family dinners we used to have when Michael was her age. "Smells good," I said to Linda, hanging my jacket on the back of a chair. "What are we having?" "Chicken and rice," Linda replied without turning around. Her voice was flat, distracted. "Patty's already eaten. She has that science project due tomorrow." I walked over to Patty and ruffled her hair. "How's the volcano coming along, kiddo?" "It's not a volcano, Dad," Patty said with that exasperated tone kids master so early. "It's about the water cycle. Mrs. Peterson said volcanoes are too easy." "Well, excuse me, Professor Patty," I said, making her giggle. At least someone in this house still enjoyed my company. Linda served dinner in silence. She'd made a plate for herself, but barely touched it, just pushed the food around while scrolling through her phone. The same pattern we've fallen into for months now. I try to make conversation about Patty's school, about my day, about anything. Linda responded with nods and one-word answers. After Patty went upstairs to finish her homework, I decided to try something different. Linda was loading the dishwasher, her back to me as always. I walked up behind her and gently placed my hands on her shoulders, the way I used to when we were young and still connected. "Linda," I said softly, "we need to talk. I feel like we're strangers living in the same house." She tensed under my touch, then shrugged my hands off her shoulders like they burned. "Gary, please. I'm tired." "You're always tired these days," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "When's the last time we really talked? When's the last time we—" "Don't," Linda interrupted, spinning around to face me. Her eyes were cold, distant. Just don't touch me tonight, okay? I can't handle this right now. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. Don't touch me tonight. I'm not in the mood, or maybe later. Just a flat rejection of any physical connection, any intimacy. Like I was some stranger trying to get too close. I stepped back, hands raised in surrender. Okay, I get it. But I didn't get it. Not really. This was my wife, the woman I'd been with for over 2 decades. The woman who used to curl up against me on the couch, who used to hold my hand while we walked. Now she couldn't stand my touch. Linda turned back to the dishes without another word. I stood there for a moment, watching her scrub the same plate 3 times, and something inside me shifted. Not anger exactly, more like resignation. Like the last piece of hope I'd been carrying finally gave up and died. I walked upstairs to check on Patty, help her with a few math problems, then went to bed alone while Linda stayed downstairs watching television. As I lay there staring at the ceiling, those words echoed in my head. Don't touch me tonight. Tomorrow, I thought, I'm going to whisper something back. That night, I couldn't sleep. Linda's words kept echoing in my head like a broken pipe that wouldn't stop dripping. Don't touch me tonight. After 22 years, I'd become someone she couldn't stand to have near her. I slipped out of bed around 2 a.m., careful not to wake her. Linda was curled up on her side of the bed, as far from my side as possible. The woman who used to steal my pillow and sprawl across the whole mattress now treated the center line like a border fence. Downstairs, I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table where we'd shared thousands of meals. The house felt different in the darkness, hollow somehow. I found myself remembering better times. Linda laughing at my terrible jokes, the way she used to dance around the kitchen while cooking, how she'd light up when I walked through the door after work. When did that change? When did I become an inconvenience instead of her partner? I walked to my truck and drove through the empty streets of Riverside. The 24-hour diner on Main Street was still open, but I didn't want coffee or conversation with strangers. I just needed to move, to think, to figure out how a man rebuilds something that's already broken beyond repair. Past the high school where Patty would graduate in 6 years. Past the park where Linda and I used to take Michael when he was small. Past the church where we'd renewed our vows on our 10th anniversary, both of us believing we'd last forever. The truth hit me somewhere between the old water tower and the highway overpass. Linda didn't love me anymore. Maybe she hadn't for years. I'd been so busy providing, so focused on keeping the business running and the bills paid, that I'd missed the moment when her feelings changed. But here's what really ate at me. I wasn't sure I loved her anymore either. Not the woman she'd become. I loved the memory of who she used to be, the ghost of our early years together. The Linda sitting in our bedroom, right now, was a stranger wearing my wife's face. I pulled into the parking lot of my shop and sat there until sunrise, watching the sky change from black to gray to pale gold. 22 years of marriage, and it had come down to this. 2 people sharing a house and nothing else. When I finally drove home, Linda was already up, making Patty's lunch for school. She glanced at me briefly when I walked in. "Where were you?" Linda asked, her tone more curious than concerned. "Driving," I said. "Thinking." She nodded like that explained everything. No follow-up questions, no worry about my well-being. Just acceptance that her husband had disappeared for hours in the middle of the night. That's when I knew for certain. We were already over. We just hadn't made it official yet. The next few days passed in a blur of emergency calls and family routines that felt increasingly hollow. I fixed the Martineau's water heater, unclogged the Gonzalez family's kitchen sink, and replaced Mrs. Chin's garbage disposal. Normal work for a man whose life was falling apart in slow motion. At home, Linda and I moved around each other like polite strangers. She made dinner. I ate it. She did laundry. I thanked her. We discussed Patty's upcoming parent-teacher conference and the need to replace our aging furnace. Logistics and nothing more. Friday evening, Michael called to check in. He'd been doing that more often lately, as if he sensed something was wrong. "Hey, Dad." Michael's voice came through the phone. "How's everyone doing?" "We're fine," I lied, watching Linda help Patty with homework at the dining table. "How's little Emma?" "Growing like a weed. Rachel thinks she's going to be tall like you." "Listen, Dad, I was thinking maybe we could all get together soon. It's been too long since we had a real family dinner." The irony wasn't lost on me. My son wanted to gather the family, just as it was falling apart. "That sounds great, Michael. We'll figure something out." After I hung up, Linda looked at me with something that might have been concern. Everything okay with Michael? He wants to plan a family dinner. Bring Rachel and Emma over. Linda nodded absently. That would be nice. But her tone suggested she was already planning excuses to avoid it. The thought of pretending to be a happy family for our son and daughter-in-law probably seemed exhausting to her. That night, I made a decision. Not out of anger or spite, but out of something deeper, self-respect. I was 49 years old, still healthy, still capable of building something new. I'd spent 2 decades creating a successful business from nothing. If I could do that, I could rebuild my life too. I couldn't force Linda to love me, couldn't make her want my touch or value my presence. But I could stop accepting scraps and hoping for more. I could stop pretending that staying in a marriage where I felt unwanted was noble or right. The plan started forming in my mind. Simple, direct, no drama. I'd wait until Monday when Patty was at school. I'd pack a bag, leave a note, and disappear quietly. Linda would probably feel relieved. Patty would be confused and hurt, but kids are resilient. She'd understand someday that sometimes adults have to make hard choices. I thought about the business, the house, the logistics of separation. None of it seemed as complicated as I'd once imagined. When a pipe bursts, you don't spend weeks debating whether to fix it. You shut off the water and get to work. My marriage had burst. Time to stop the flooding and start over. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, matching my mood perfectly. Linda left early for a part-time job at the dental office, kissing Patty goodbye, but barely acknowledging me. Patty caught the school bus at 7:30, waving from the window like she always did. In a few hours, the house would be empty except for me. I'd made my decision over the weekend. No dramatic confrontations, no tearful explanations, no begging for one more chance. Just a clean exit from a marriage that had died years ago. We'd both been walking around its corpse, pretending it was still breathing. After my morning coffee, I walked upstairs to our bedroom and pulled my old military duffel bag from the closet. 25 years since I'd used it, but the canvas was still solid. I packed methodically. 3 days of clothes, toiletries, my passport, important documents, and the small wooden jewelry box my father had made for my mother. Everything else could wait. Standing in the doorway of Patty's room, I felt the first real pang of doubt. Her soccer trophies lined the bookshelf, and her stuffed elephant, the one she'd brought from her last foster home, sat on her pillow. This kid had already lost one family through no fault of her own. Now I was about to disrupt her world again. But staying in a broken marriage wouldn't help Patty either. Kids aren't stupid. She could feel the tension between Linda and me, see how he barely spoke anymore. Maybe honesty was better than pretense. I wrote 2 notes. The first, for Linda, was simple. Linda, I can't do this anymore. The papers will be filed this week. You'll have the house and full custody of Patty. I'll arrange support payments through my lawyer. Take care of yourself. Gary. The second note was harder. Patty, Daddy has to go away for a while. This isn't your fault, and it doesn't mean I don't love you. Sometimes grown-ups can't figure out how to be happy together, but that doesn't change how much I love you. I'll call you soon. Love, Dad. I left Linda's note on the kitchen counter, where she'd find it immediately. Patty's note went on her pillow, along with $50 and a promise to myself that I'd find a way to explain this properly when she was ready to hear it. Loading my truck, I looked back at the house we'd bought 15 years ago. The front porch where Michael took prom pictures. The driveway where I taught him to change oil. The garage where Linda and I used to talk while I worked on weekend projects. All of it felt like someone else's life now. I drove to my business partner Jake's house first. Jake and I had started Hicks Plumbing together, though he'd been mostly silent partner for the last 5 years. If anyone could keep the business running while I figured out my next move, it was him. Gary, Jake said when he opened his door, taking in my serious expression. What's going on? I need a favor, I said. A big one. Jake didn't ask too many questions, which I appreciated. He'd been through his own divorce 3 years back, so he understood that sometimes a man reaches his limit. I explained the situation briefly. Marriage over. Needed time to sort things out. Could he handle the emergency calls for a few weeks? Take all the time you need, Jake said, clapping me on the shoulder. The business will be here when you're ready. I drove north toward Lake Erie. No particular destination in mind, just distance from Riverside and the life I was leaving behind. Around noon, I stopped at a roadside diner and ordered coffee and a burger I couldn't really taste. The waitress, a woman about Linda's age with kind eyes, asked if I was okay. Just traveling, I said, which was the truth. Well, you drive safe, she said. Life's too short to spend it looking miserable. I almost laughed at that. Life's too short to spend it married to someone who can't stand your touch, I thought. But I just nodded and left a good tip. By evening, I found myself in a small town called Millfield, about 2 hours from home. The Millfield Motor Lodge wasn't fancy, but it was clean and cheap. The desk clerk, an elderly man with paint-stained fingers, handed me a key to room 12. How long you staying? He asked. Not sure yet, I said. He nodded like that was a perfectly normal answer. Maybe guys like me showed up regularly. Middle-aged men with duffel bags and thousand-yard stares, running from lives that had stopped fitting. Room 12 had a bed, a chair, a small table, and a window that looked out on farmland. No television, no phone, just silence and space to think. I sat on the edge of the bed and called Michael. Dad. Michael's voice was concerned. Where are you calling from? This number isn't familiar. I'm taking some time away, I said carefully. Your mother and I are having problems. Dad, what kind of problems? Maybe Rachel and I could. Son, I interrupted gently. Some things can't be fixed by good intentions. Your mom and I have grown apart. It happens sometimes, even to people who love each other. There was a long pause. Are you getting divorced? The word hung in the air like smoke. Probably. I'm sorry, Michael. I know this isn't what you want to hear. What about Patty? Michael asked. She needs you. Your mother will take good care of her, and I'll figure out how to stay involved in Patty's life. But I can't stay in a marriage that's making both your mother and me miserable. After hanging up, I lay on the thin motel mattress and stared at the ceiling. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt something approaching peace. Not happiness. That would take time. But the relief of finally being honest with myself. Tomorrow I'd start building something new. Tonight, I'd just breathe. 3 days into my stay at the Millfield Motor Lodge, my phone started ringing. Lynn had found my notes, obviously. The first call came Tuesday evening while I was eating dinner at the local diner. I watched her name flash on the screen and let it go to voicemail. The message was brief. Gary, we need to talk. Call me back. No anger in her voice. No tears. Just that same flat tone she'd been using for months. I deleted the message without returning the call. Wednesday brought 4 more calls. Thursday, she tried 6 times. By Friday, she was leaving longer messages. Gary, this is ridiculous. You can't just disappear. What am I supposed to tell Patty? She's asking where you are every day. That one stung. I called Patty twice. Brief conversations where she seemed confused but not devastated. Kids adapt faster than adults sometimes. But knowing she was asking about me every day made my chest tight. Jake called Friday afternoon with an update on the business. Everything's running smooth, he said. But, Gary, Linda came by the shop yesterday. She looked rough. Whatever's going on between you two, maybe you should consider talking to her. Did she say what she wanted? I asked. Just asked if I knew where you were. I told her I didn't, which is technically true since you haven't told me exactly where you're staying. I appreciated Jake's discretion. Thanks for covering for me. No problem. But Gary, you can't hide forever. Eventually, you're going to have to deal with the lawyers, the paperwork, all that mess. He was right, of course. I'd been living in a kind of limbo, eating diner food and walking country roads, avoiding the practical realities of ending a 22-year marriage. But this peaceful interlude couldn't last forever. Saturday morning brought an unexpected call from Michael. Dad, my son said, his voice tense. I just got off the phone with Mom. She's worried sick about you. I'm fine, Michael. I told you I needed time to think. She said you left notes talking about filing papers and custody arrangements. Dad, this sounds serious. It is serious, I said. Your mother and I are getting divorced. Long pause. Dad, have you considered counseling? Marriage therapy? There might be ways to work through whatever's happening. I leaned against the motel room window, looking out at the farmland that stretched to the horizon. How do you explain to your son that his parents have become strangers? That love can die so slowly you don't notice until it's already gone? Michael, some things can't be fixed. Your mother and I have been unhappy for a long time. We're better apart. What about Patty? She's just a kid. She's already been through enough trauma. That hit hard because it was true. I'll figure out how to be part of Patty's life. But I can't stay married to your mother just to maintain the illusion of family stability. Dad, Michael said quietly, I've never heard you sound like this. So final. Because I'm final about this, son. Sometimes a man has to make hard choices. After hanging up, I sat on the motel bed and thought about masculinity, about what it meant to be a strong man in a situation like this. Some people would say a real man fights for his marriage, never gives up, pushes through any obstacle. But I've been fighting a losing battle for years. Sometimes strength means knowing when to walk away. Sunday morning, I drove into town for breakfast and ran into the motel desk clerk at the local hardware store. Earl, I learned his name was. He was buying paint supplies, and I was looking for work gloves. Mine had been left behind in my hasty exit. Mr. Hicks, Earl said, nodding toward my basket. Planning some projects? Just need decent gloves, I said. Hands feel naked without them. Earl laughed. I know that feeling. You're a tradesman, right? Could tell by the calluses. Plumber. Own a business back in Riverside. Riverside's a good town. What brings you to Millfield? I paused, considering how much to share. Earl seemed like a straight shooter, the kind of man who minded his own business, but offered help when needed. Going through a divorce. Needed some distance to clear my head. Earl nodded knowingly. Been there myself, 20 years ago. Sometimes a man needs space to figure out who he is without someone else defining him. Exactly. You know, Earl said, if you're planning to stick around a while, I could use help with some project around the motel. Nothing fancy, just maintenance work. Leaky faucets, running toilets, that sort of thing. Can't pay much, but it might beat sitting in that room thinking about your troubles. The offer appealed to me more than I'd expected. What kind of work? Room 8 has a shower that won't drain properly. Room 15 needs a new toilet installed. Basic stuff, but I'm too old to be crawling around on bathroom floors. I could take a look, I said. We shook hands in the hardware store aisle, and for the first time in weeks, I felt useful again. Purpose beyond wallowing in the wreckage of my marriage. Monday morning, I started work at the motel. Earl provided tools and materials, and I provided labor and expertise. The shower in room 8 had a simple clog that took 30 minutes to clear. The toilet installation took most of the afternoon, mainly because the previous toilet had been installed by someone who clearly didn't know what they were doing. Working with my hands again felt like coming home. The familiar weight of tools, the satisfaction of solving problems, the simple logic of plumbing systems. It all reminded me who I was beyond being Linda's husband or Patty's father. That evening, Linda called again. This time I answered. Gary, she said, and I could hear relief in her voice. Thank God. Where are you? I'm safe, I said. That's all you need to know right now. Gary, we need to talk about this properly. You can't just abandon your family. I didn't abandon anyone, I said, keeping my voice calm. I left a marriage that wasn't working. There's a difference. What about Patty? What about the business? What about the life we built together? Patty will be fine. You're a good mother, Linda. Jake's handling the business. And the life we built together stopped working for both of us a long time ago. Silence on the other end. Then, Gary, I think we should try counseling. Maybe we can fix this. Linda, I said gently, you told me not to touch you. You've been treating me like a stranger in my own house for months. There's nothing left to fix. I was just stressed, overwhelmed. We can work through this. No, I said firmly. We can't. I'll be in touch about the legal stuff, but the marriage is over. I hung up feeling sad but certain. Some bridges couldn't be rebuilt once they collapsed completely. 6 months after leaving Riverside, I'd settled into a routine in Millfield that felt more like home than my old life ever had. Earl offered me a permanent position managing maintenance for a small chain of motels, and I'd moved into a proper apartment above the hardware store downtown. Small place, but it was mine. The divorce papers were finalized in November. Linda kept the house. I kept the business. We split our savings and retirement accounts down the middle. Patty would spend summers with me and alternating holidays. It was all very civilized, very adult, very sad. Michael visited for Thanksgiving, bringing Rachel and little Emma. We had dinner at the local diner since I didn't have space to host properly. Emma was walking now, tottering around the restaurant with that fearless confidence toddlers have. Dad, Michael said while Emma explored every corner of our booth, you seem different. Calmer somehow. I feel calmer, I admitted. Like I've stopped fighting a war I was never going to win. Do you miss it? The old life? I considered his question while watching Emma try to climb onto Rachel's lap. I miss what was supposed to be. I miss the idea of it. But the reality? No, I don't miss that. What about Mom? Do you miss her? I miss who she used to be. But that person was gone long before I left. Michael nodded thoughtfully. Patty seems to be adjusting well. She talks about visiting you constantly. Patty had spent 2 weeks with me in August, and it had been the best time we'd ever had together. Just the two of us. No tension, no walking on eggshells around Linda's moods. We'd gone fishing, worked on simple plumbing projects together, talked about everything and nothing. She was growing up to be a remarkable kid. How's your mother doing? I asked. Better, actually. She joined some kind of book club, started taking art classes. She seems lighter somehow, like she's figuring out who she is again. That made me genuinely happy. Linda deserved to find herself, to discover what she wanted beyond the roles of wife and mother. Maybe our divorce had freed her as much as it had freed me. December brought unexpected news. Earl was retiring and wanted to sell the motel chain. He offered me first chance to buy, with owner financing and a generous payment plan. You've got a good head for business, Earl said over coffee at the diner. And you understand what it takes to keep properties running smoothly. I think you do well. The idea appealed to me more than I'd expected. After 30 years of crawling under sinks and fixing other people's plumbing disasters, the thought of owning something substantial, something that could provide steady income without breaking my back, seemed like a gift. I called my lawyer, ran the numbers, talked to my accountant. Everything checked out. By New Year's Day, I'd be the owner of Millfield Motor Lodge and 2 other small properties in neighboring towns. Starting over at 49 had seemed impossible 6 months ago. Now it felt like the smartest thing I'd ever done. 1 year later, Linda called me on what would have been our 23rd wedding anniversary. I was in my office at the main motel, reviewing occupancy reports and planning renovations for the spring season. Gary, she said when I answered, I hope it's okay that I'm calling. Of course it's okay. How are you, Linda? I'm good. Really good, actually. I wanted to thank you. Thank me for what? For having the courage to leave. For forcing both of us to be honest about what wasn't working. I leaned back in my chair, surprised by her words. I never thought you'd see it that way. It took time, Linda admitted. I was angry at first, then hurt, then confused. But eventually, I realized you did what I couldn't do. You ended something that was making both of us miserable. Are you happy now? I asked. Happier than I've been in years. I'm taking classes at the community college. Might go back for my teaching degree. I've made new friends. Joined a hiking group. I feel like myself again for the first time since before Michael was born. I'm glad to hear that. What about you? Michael says you bought the motels. 3 properties now. It's challenging, but good challenging. Different from plumbing, but I'm learning. There was a comfortable pause. Gary, I owe you an apology. For those last months. For making you feel unwanted in your own home. You deserved better than that. We both did, I said. We just couldn't give it to each other anymore. Patty loves her visits with you. She says you're teaching her to fish and fix things. She talks about maybe going to trade school someday, instead of college. I laughed. She's got good hands for it. Reminds me of my father that way. Gary, Linda said softly, I want you to know that despite everything, I don't regret our marriage. We had good years. We raised Michael together. We gave Patty a stable home when she needed one. That counts for something. It counts for everything, I agreed. After he hung up, I walked outside and stood in the parking lot of my motel, looking up at the stars. Somewhere 60 miles south, Linda was probably doing the same thing from the backyard of her old house. Different lives now, but connected by shared history and a daughter we both loved. My phone buzzed with a text from Patty. Dad, can we go fishing this weekend? I want to try that new spot you found. I smiled and texted back. Absolutely. Can't wait to see you. At 50 years old, I was finally living the life I wanted instead of the life I thought I was supposed to want. Some people might call that selfish. I call it honest. The best decisions aren't always the easy ones. Sometimes a man has to walk away from everything familiar to find out who he really is. Sometimes you have to whisper goodbye to one life before you can say hello to another.